Right, that's all we have time for as far as the questions are concerned. I'm now going to ask each of the candidates to sum up their position and to take 2 minutes over it. And I'm going to start off with number one again, that's Hilary Benn.
Max, thanks very much. These leadership hustings have been, in my view, really good for the party. We're talking about politics, we're talking about the future, and whatever the outcome of this election, we've got to keep talking between us. What do we need to do? We need to unite as a party. The next deputy leader is going to have to support Gordon Brown 100%, but he's going to have to tell him things that he needs to hear sometimes, being your voice of the grassroots. I think we've got to give Labour Party members a greater say in the decisions that we make. We've got to bridge the gap, which there is. We've got to champion a straightforward kind of politics, which listens, which tells it like it is, which acts on what we hear, because that's the only way we're going to defeat the cynicism that will otherwise destroy all of us. Because in the end, when people see Labour politics, not as remote and distant, but as a means of dealing with the problems they have today and realising their hopes and aspirations for a better tomorrow, then that's how you win people's trust, that's how you defeat the Libs, Plaid and the Tories. And the Tories are the biggest threat of all, because we know the Tory government's entrenched inequality. Labour's historic task is to bury it. And in the end, the best guide to what to do are our values as a movement, because, you know, they shape our policies, they matter as much as our policies. And I want a country which acts on its concern about poverty, whether it's here in the UK or across the globe. I want a culture which celebrates the contribution that everybody makes in the trade union movement, in community groups, in business, in public service. I want a society which actually values the relationships we have one with another as much as it does economic stability. I want a democracy in which we actually ask people to give something back as well as asking things of others. I want a world in which we put the fight for justice at the heart of our foreign policy. And what all of us want is to continue to have a Labour government that doesn't just redistribute wealth, but power and opportunity, because that's the way we're going to change the communities we come from, the country of which we're proud, and the world of which we are part for a better. And that's the reasons we joined the party.
Max, I think that Tony Blair and John Prescott, and we ought to send our best wishes to John Prescott for a speedy recovery, have led this party brilliantly for the last 13 years. They led us out of opposition and into power. And they've led us into power for not the traditional form of Labour government, which is a short interlude in Conservative rule, but 3 straight election victories. We've now begun to see how, with long periods in power, you can really begin to make a change in society. And I've been in this party for 35 years. I was there in the 70s in my tank top and flares when the Labour government went out, and we immediately started this process of the culture of betrayal that we slipped into. It took Neil Kinnock to pull us out of that. And the history of the 20th century was that the Conservative Party ruled in this country for longer than the Communist Party ruled in Russia, and they didn't have elections. So that... Gordon's not thinking of that, incidentally. He's might have just crossed his mind a couple of times. But so you have to look at how have we managed this transformation. And one of the reasons is we haven't, by and large, fallen back into that culture of betrayal over the last 10 years. Yes, there's been issues. There will always be issues. I mean, being in government is difficult. Being in opposition is easy. You just blame the government. Lots of our backbenchers still do. But being in government is tough. You make tough decisions all the time. So, yes, the next election won't be a vote of thanks for the last 10 years, but we have to build on these foundations. It has to be renewal, not reversal. It has to be ensuring that we convince the British people that they've got a party of substance, no better person to lead than Gordon in that, a party of substance on their side through some of the most dramatic changes we're going to see on climate change, on demographic change, on energy security. All these problems can be resolved. I'm confident we can do that. I'm confident these are 5 good people here, but I'd like you to vote for me. Thank you.
Alan, thank you very much. We are allowing a few seconds for laughs, actually. I think you did. Hazel.
Thanks very much, Max. It's brilliant to be in Cardiff, and if I look around, you know, this is an example of the regeneration of a Labour government and Labour here in Wales. And what I've said throughout the whole of this deputy leadership contest is that I do think we've got to remind ourselves about how successful we have been as a Labour government. There's a temptation that we slip into self-criticism, and that's no bad thing sometimes. But actually, if I look around my city in Salford, every weekend when I go home, there's something going on. All our schools are being refurbished. We're building local health centres. We're getting more people staying on at school, more people going on to university. You know, we have changed this country in very, very many ways, and I think we've got to be proud of that success. I was brought up in Salford in the 1950s and 60s. My dad was an AU shop steward. My mum worked for a trade union. They both left school at 14. They didn't have the opportunities that we've given to very many generations in our country. My brother drives a Manchester bus, and I suppose I've done it the hard way, but if you do it like that, it does teach you to be tough, and being in government is sometimes about making some difficult decisions. But the reason that we've won those elections is because we're in touch with the British people, and I think the values of most working class families are that they want to get on in life. They do want to get a better job, live in a better neighbourhood, they want the kids to get a better education, and I think that's why we've got to stay being the party that's on their side about aspiration, about success, about making the future a better place to be. And I think you need a deputy leader who's going to be totally focused on winning those marginal seats at the next election, which means we can stay in power, whether it's Ynys-Môn, whether it's Cardiff North here, Carmarthen West, taking Preseli back, Clwyd West. We have got to fight those marginal seats. We've got to have the next generation of activists, young people coming into our movement and making it a friendly and welcoming place to be, which unfortunately is not always the case. And we've got to take the fight to the Tories. The idea that David Cameron is friendly to women is an absolute joke. He has voted against every single bit of our legislation on maternity, on paternity, on full-time rights for part-time workers. I think we know what women want, and it isn't David Cameron. I want to win the next election for Labour, for families like ours right across Britain, and I hope you'll join me.
Well, after a month on the road, it's great to be back home. And I want to enthuse everybody that we've lost to come back to Labour, who share our values. And my values were forged watching the courage of my parents, put in jail, issued with banning orders, forced into exile, where inspired by them I became a leader of the anti-apartheid movement and set up the Anti-Nazi League to fight fascism and racism, worked for a trade union movement, joined the Labour Party 30 years ago, and perhaps most proud of all, privileged to become an adopted son of Wales, and in the tradition of Nye Bevan socialism and the enduring culture in Wales of mutual care and solidarity and community. Because for me, politics is not a career, it's a passion. What I want to do is reconnect with all of those and bring them back, not just celebrating what we've achieved as a government, including the Northern Ireland conflict resolved and billions of pounds to sick miners, but also recognising we've made mistakes. Iraq's been very difficult, and therefore we need a radical new vision, leading the world in the fight against climate change, with environmental justice and also social justice running together. Narrowing the gap between rich and the poor, with far more affordable housing for both buying and renting. Making sure we spread democracy right through the House of Lords and decentralised power down to local government. Making sure we have a progressive internationalist foreign policy. And to do all of that, you need a loyal deputy to Gordon, but somebody who will also carry messages, like the umbilical cord between the cabinet and the grassroots, to and from the cabinet, and we need to do much more of that to win next time. And always remembering that in this fight to beat the Tories next time, we come back to our values of social justice, our values of equality, our universal values of human rights and democracy, not just here in Wales and throughout Britain, but worldwide. If we can preach those values with enthusiasm, we can win next time. We have to win next time, beat Plaid Cymru, beat the Liberal Democrats, and beat the Tories with a new enthusiastic reinvigoration of our government and our movement, and that's what I want to do.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't want to reverse things either, Alan, actually. I mean, I don't want to go back to the 80s, where many of us were in the Labour Party. Half the room wanted to beat the other half up. The other half wanted to invite the Russians in and abolish the police. So none of us want to go back there, right? None of us want to go back there. But we do have to change. We have to change in terms of we view our own party. and we have to change in terms of our policy priorities. What we talked about earlier, 200,000 members lost, 20,000 a year for 10 years, nearly 2,000 a month. That's not good enough. We lost 500 councillors again this month. We need to rebuild the party from the bottom up, and that's why this job should be so important, and that's why we need to separate out the elements of the present job occupied by John Prescott in terms of Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Leader of the Labour Party and a big ministerial job. It solely should be about rebuilding the party from the bottom up and articulating Labour Party policy to the government. But we also need to change in terms of policy as well. Talk about confronting people's concerns about their insecurity at work. I had a Lithuanian gang in my constituency recently on £15 a day, barely half the minimum wage. For their lunch, they were eating cold beans and stale bread on a public contract. I had a bloke who rented out his shed, he put an oven in it, and he had 8 East Europeans hot bed in it and employed on local contracts. We need to do much, much more to protect people at work and tap into and resolve this insecurity at work. So to stop the clock for a minute there, mate. We need to do much, much more in terms of access to good quality, low-cost housing for rent. For years we've been campaigning at Labour Party policy in terms of the fourth option, a level playing field so councillors can build. We now have agreement across this platform to do that, and that is one of the enduring outcomes of this deputy leadership campaign. We need to do more to acknowledge our culpability in the situation in Iraq and reconciling ourselves to our failures there, both in terms of the premise and also the objective of building a liberal, stable democracy, which we have not done. Fourth, we need to reconsider our approach to public services in terms of the role of the private sector in delivering frontline services. I think we can do all of this. If we get it right, we can rebuild the party for what it is at its best, a vehicle to articulate the concerns of working people. In turn, we can rebuild a progressive agenda built around the economic and social emancipation of working people. And I would suggest to you that's why every single person in this room joined the Labour Party. Thank you very much.
Well, I think the task ahead of us is clear. We've got to rebuild the party and we've got to win back the full trust and confidence of the British people. And I think we can rebuild the party. But to do that, it's got to be a more powerful and a more democratic party. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I never joined the Labour Party for it to be a leader's supporters club, however great the leader is. And I don't think anybody in the party wants to go back to those fratricidal, divided, sectarian days. The party's learnt its lesson that if we're bitter and divided, we stay out of government and we can't do anything that we got into the Labour Party to do. So I think the party can be trusted and should be trusted and should have more of a say. I never, ever lose sight of the good that Labour has done in government, because I can remember those pay slips that my constituents used to show me, £1.60 an hour, and we wouldn't have had a national minimum wage without a Labour government. And I remember people showing me in my advice surgery in Peckham the letters from King's College Hospital saying your appointment for your hip replacement is in 2 years, 3 months' time. So we must never lose sight of the good that Labour's done. But there are new things that we need to do. Hundreds of millions of pounds have been invested in council housing, but there's a chronic council house shortage. We need to allow councils to build homes again and make sure they don't have to sell them. We've done a huge amount to tackle poverty, particularly child poverty and pensioner poverty, but we've got to move on to tackling the gap between rich and poor. We're in the Labour Party because we hate inequality. And although there's more jobs in the economy, as John has said, there's more insecurity at work, and we need to address that. Next, on Cameron and the Tories. The Tory press have got back to their usual colours, giving David Cameron a free ride. And I think we've got to say there's a very clear choice. If you want commitment, principles, experience, reliability, then Gordon Brown's your man. If you want elitism, shallowness, opportunism, then you've got a choice. It's either David Cameron or Paris Hilton. And I think we should be saying, for us women in the party, we should be saying to our sisters, we know what sort of man David Cameron is. He's the sort of person he's the sort of man who's only interested in women for one thing, and that's their votes. Thank you.